Hello and welcome to this discussion group regarding mentoring for personal and professional development. My name's Richard Tulley, and for the last 5 years I've been Director of Programme Project Management at Sopra Steria, and that role is all around developing a programme project management capability and very much an emphasis upon developing the people, developing our project professionals. That's been really insightful and really stimulating for me personally. It's taken me into a really fascinating and very kind of enriching developmental kind of journey into coaching, mentoring, and generally developing people personally and professionally. And so the focus for this afternoon is a discussion towards mentoring, and really talking about how being mentored or being a mentor, or both, is really beneficial for both your personal and your professional development. And this is part of a series of discussions that have been timed to coincide with the launch of the APM mentoring program. So today I'll talk about the intent and the purpose in a moment, but what it moves on to on the 21st of April is a discussion group specifically about being an effective mentor. So this is aimed more towards people who are mentoring rather than being mentored. But equally, shortly after that, on the 12th of May, the third discussion really focuses on the mentee with some guidance, some advice, some ideas, and some insight about how they can make their mentoring relationship work best for them. And these events are available through the APM website, through the events page. They're accessible to members and non-members alike, and they're free to join. And in both cases, the following sessions will last for 1 hour. So I hope that today entices you into to want to explore mentoring further. But I'll move on and just explain the structure of today's discussion. So broadly, this is designed for anybody who has an interest in mentoring, whether it's just to gain some understanding and insight into what mentoring is, whether it's because you're thinking of starting a mentoring relationship, if it's because you're thinking of becoming a mentor, or you just want to generally make more of your mentoring experience, then hopefully there is something in this discussion this afternoon for everybody. And by way of a kind of a roadmap, just to map out what we're going to talk about this afternoon, I'm going to start and talk about personal and professional development. And because we're talking about mentoring and the benefits it can have in terms of your development, it's important we just start by getting a little bit grounded around what we mean by personal development, what we mean by professional development, and the factors that influence and help us develop generally. I'm then going to talk broadly about coaching and mentoring, which are very closely related, but have some fundamental differences to really establish some coaching principles that I think will help people understand mentoring better and make most out of that mentoring experience. We'll then start to drill down into mentoring specifically to give us a basis then to talk about the very specific kind of benefits for the mentee and the mentor. And I'll close out with just a few statistics and a bit of insight to help you kind of understand and quantify in your own mind the benefits of being mentored or being a mentor. So moving on from there then, so we're going to start with how people learn and develop generally. And the 70-20-10 model, as you can see in the top right hand corner there, expressed as a pie chart. This was a piece of academic study in the 1980s by someone called Morgan McCall in the Centre for Creative Leadership, and they were studying broadly the areas, the kind of activities by which people were learning and developing. And this is still established learning and development best practice, by the way. It's traveled the last sort of 30-40 years very well, and it's still current thinking. And the largest part of the pie chart, that blue area, is us at work, in our workplace. It's what you might call learning on the job. And our workplace invariably is very developmental. You know, and the more tuned in the organization is to developing people, the more developmental your workplace is. But through being given process and procedures, through learning on the job, through shadowing people, giving feedback, getting instruction, being coached, and repetition, our development principally comes in our workplace through the work that we do day in, day out. What we would know as training, or what was referred to as formal learning, is the 10%. That's the green area there. And broadly, people would normally, in any kind of profession, not just program project management, over time get training specific to their role, as well as getting guidance in the workplace. And that's the 80%. But the 20% that quite often goes unrecognised and doesn't get exploited to the same extent is what's referred to as social learning. And social learning in a broad sense is about learning through other people, learning through interaction with other people. And this is very much where coaching and mentoring come in. So this is a way to explore, in effect, 100% of your learning and development opportunities. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. So if we just start with professional development, so quite often people talk about personal and professional development like they're interchangeable. What we're about to explore is the fact that they're very closely linked, but there are some pronounced differences. So professional development is all about your job. It's about your career. It's about your workplace. It's about what you do professionally for a living. And what you're trying to do in terms of professional development is increase competence, proficiency, understanding, and ultimately towards performance. It's being most effective in your role. It's growing within your role so that you can take on more responsibility, more accountability, develop your career in professional circles. And in a cyclical kind of fashion, as you build and acquire knowledge and you apply that and you get increasing breadth of experience, that's all around building competence, all about making you better at your job and more performant in the workplace. And you'll notice the word work is very heavily emphasized within a definition of professional development. When we talk about personal development, though, this is more about your growth as a person. It's about how you develop and grow before you get to work and learn certain social behaviors. You learn how to interact, you learn how to make friends, you learn how to kind of behave when you've got kind of, your teachers talking to you, for example. And as you get into professional circles, you're still developing those interactive social behavioral kind of skills. And what you're really doing is you're nurturing your own potential as you grow. So personal development has got more of an accent around developing relationships, increasing your self-awareness, communicating more effectively, be able to engage with people, and ultimately developing very mature emotional intelligence, developing leadership qualities. And so whilst personal and professional developments are different, what we're illustrating here is that in a Venn diagram kind of way, there's a real close coupling between professional and personal development. And the kind of things you can see in the center of the page: self-awareness, active listening, communication, for example. And so you imagine working in a team on a project, and you imagine that as a set of cogs going round. All of your professional knowledge, all of your experience, all of your competence will move the cogs around, but they could grate, as it were. And the thing that really oils those cogs and makes them move more seamlessly and more efficiently is those social skills, the behavioral skills, the personal kind of growth that allows you to understand how to interact, how to negotiate, how to compromise, how to pose a question, how to challenge behaviors you're not comfortable with. All of those kind of relationship skills is what really allows you to more effectively apply your professional skills. So the foundations for development are important as well, and this introduces another concept. So if you keep in your mind the concept of social learning, that 20%, what we're going to explore now is the foundations of development. And this, again, isn't really a specific program project management theory. This is about generally most professional roles, how people develop. And you have three foundational elements, each of which is always important, but the relative importance of each of the foundations changes through your career. So for example, at an early stage, when you pick up a new job, the knowledge has to come first. Without understanding how to be a project manager, how to plan, how to manage risk, you can't put that into practice. Therefore, you can't build that body of experience. And then over time, the experience becomes the more determining factor, a breadth of experience, different types of projects, different types of solutions, different types of industry kind of domains. But ultimately, you get to a tipping point where in program project management terms, moving from project management to program management, where you take on greater accountability, you have to delegate more than you're doing. And ultimately, to make that transition and be effective, the behavioral skills become by far and away the determining factor. So thinking, and most of these things are highlighted in orange as we go through. But please keep in mind the concept of social learning, and please keep in mind the concept of the significance of developing those behavioural skills as one moves through their professional career. And so from the foundations, we have what we'd call the enablers. So what helps us be more effective at work? What helps us develop? Training, professional memberships, clearly such as the APM, professional accreditations, and your commitment to CPD. But those enablers are still largely around professional development, and they're largely workplace oriented. When we get into the accelerators, we start to explore something quite different, which is much more around the social learning. It's much more around your personal development, because it's your mindset, it's your ability to adapt and develop what you might call a growth mindset, but a positive outlook where you're being proactive about your development. You're looking for development opportunities. You're conscious of how you interact with others. You moderate your behavior. You adapt to situations with people, and you're committed to your development. And so the mindset leads to action, and the action to accelerate your development will quite often include being coached or being a coach, being mentored or being a mentor, networking in interaction. And that ultimately, again, brings to the fore social learning and those behavioural skills, which aren't naturally part of the development, part of the organisational investment in individuals, and therefore being able to find ways outside of your day job to develop personally and develop through social learning is really the key to this afternoon's discussion about the value of mentoring. So just a brief pause to reflect on that subject matter. So social learning and behavioural skills, and recognising the nuance between personal and professional development. And I would encourage people to think of a set of scales where on the left-hand side is the full weight of your commitment and your energy towards professional development. And on the right-hand side, you'd put the full weight and commitment and energy in developing your personal development. And typically the scales will be weighted down to the left. There's much more of an accent naturally on professional development. And we have to really think hard and work hard to engineer personal development into our working patterns. So from there, we'll explore coaching and mentoring. And as you can see in the text here is a quote from a really insightful book that I would recommend, and something that was part of a core text for my coaching accreditation. But it talks about there being a common ground, a set of principles which really underpins both coaching and mentoring. And we're going to explore that over the next few minutes. But they're both learning relationships. That's really important. So when you think about mentoring, thinking about it as a relationship, thinking about it as learning and development is really important. And the word towards the bottom of the page, potential, is a really significant and a really important word when we talk about mentoring. So part of the reason I want to talk about coaching and mentoring is that many people talk about coaching in the workplace, but they've misused the word coaching. Coaching tends to have a sporting connotation, where in a sport, and golf is illustrated here, very much the coach is telling you what to do and how to do it. When we talk about coaching in the workplace, you might think about executive coaching, life coaching, professional coaching. It's very different. It's what we call non-directive, and we're going to explore that as well. So non-directive is the polar opposite of telling people what to do and how to do it. It's trying to encourage a thought process. It's trying to help people come to their own conclusions. So we will go and explore a little bit more about the roots of coaching within sport and how that has led to coaching in a professional sense. But the definition at the bottom from the International Coaching Federation is quite appropriate. It talks about a thought-provoking, creative process and inspires people, and that word potential appears. It's much more powerful than just telling someone what to do and how to do it and ask them to get on with it. So exploring non-directive, then, in the picture there you can see a push kind of dynamic and a pull kind of dynamic. And the pull dynamic is very much where we center on coaching and mentoring, about helping somebody to solve their own problem, helping somebody to understand and realize their own potential, as opposed to giving them answers. And a very well-known person in the world of professional coaching, Miles Downey, just illustrated this through a spectrum. At the very top, you've got non-directive, and increasing as you move down this page towards directive, you can see the kind of things that move you from being non-directive to directive. And as a little overlay, you can see there a little bit of a difference between coaching and mentoring. So one of the things with coaching is that the coach doesn't have to have any kind of knowledge or expertise in what we call the coachee or the client's work. Whereas within mentoring, the mentor will have at least a good understanding of the mentee's professional environment. Therefore, they're better able to perhaps make suggestions or give feedback, offering guidance. But where the phrase "with permission" appears, that means that's by exception where there's a benefit. And if you go above the blue line where the coach line is drawn, that is really the essence of mentoring. As a mentor, you listen much more than you talk, probably 10% talking, 90% listening. You reflect yourself as a mentor, and you encourage your mentee to reflect. And as you're listening, you play back what you've heard to check your understanding and to make sure that you're really understanding what the mentee is telling you. You summarize again to make sure that it's understood and it's put in context. And really it's about asking the right questions, open questions that don't just solicit a yes/no answer. So I've kind of dwelled on this slide a little bit, but the concept and the real understanding about non-directive is important. Firstly, as a mentor, to be effective, but also for a mentee to manage their own expectations about what mentoring is and isn't going to be able to do for them. And so if you've got an interest in a particular subject and you want to know how to use a certain tool at work or how to create a plan in detail, that's much more a workplace-based question rather than a mentoring question. There will be areas of detail that a mentor from a program project management background, as with the APM mentoring program, can help you with, but it's much more about helping you come to your own answers and your own kind of understanding and making choices with that kind of insight. So where the sporting connotation in coaching really comes in and is relevant to where we are today with professional coaching is a very simple equation you can see here. Performance equals potential minus interference. Very simple and a good one to remember. And let me just explain that. So a gentleman called Tim Galway, in the 80s, he was a tennis coach. And he coached tennis players at a high standard. And largely, he was coaching around techniques. So forehand, backhand, service, the techniques of tennis. And he came to a realization through talking to some of the people he was coaching and through understanding why the results weren't getting better. And broadly, he came to the conclusion that actually there was an inner opponent as opposed to the opponent on the opposite side of the net in the player's head. And that's where the concept of the inner game comes. And the interference, very simply put, was doubt, lack of confidence, lack of mental stamina, lack of resilience, call it what you may, but it was all the things that engineered doubt and uncertainty in the mind of the person he was coaching. And that interfered, it kind of impeded the full potential coming out on a tennis court. He took that into golf, he took that into skiing, so it carried on in a sporting context, but he started to work with a number of kind of like-minded individuals who were studying psychology and the mind. And that's really where professional coaching came from. It came from a world of sport, but it's much more at that non-directive end of the spectrum rather than saying, do X, do Y, do Z. That's how it's done. And it's a great book, a great read to explore if you're interested. So just to kind of round this off a little bit, the overview, this is talking now, this is both coaching and mentoring, learning, development, relationships, and they're proven to work. I'll give you some statistics at the end, but they're well established in professional circles because they work, they've been demonstrated to work. It's non-directive, and the relationship is built on trust, it's built on mutual benefit, and they're proven to accelerate development because it's something extra to what you get in your workplace, very simply. On top of which, it's much more about exploring potential, where what you tend to do at work is people look at your performance and you talk about performance management, you talk about performance reviews, and it's rare, perhaps, or uncommon depending on sort of the background you come from. But it's not often through natural consequence that people will explore potential through performance management, but they should. Whereas coaching and mentoring are exclusively looking to explore and develop potential. And really, the approach of mentoring is much more about asking the right questions rather than providing all the answers. And sometimes it's quite powerful as a mentor, where what you do is you don't provide an answer, but you make a connection, and you say, Bob would be great for that, or Sue's really good at this. Go and have a conversation. Then you start to explore networks, start to build professional and social kind of networks as well, and build awareness that way. And the skills of a mentor, the skills of a coach, it's the same set of core skills. So the reason that I've really kind of gone into a bit of detail about coaching and mentoring and the distinction between them is because they are different, and therefore for some people the most effective learning and development relationship that they could have is mentoring. In some cases it's coaching, and so you've got to be clear about the most appropriate, most effective learning and development solution for an individual for it to work best. And also as a mentor, and in your workplace as a manager, as a leader, as a colleague, sometimes you have to adapt a coaching style in a certain situation. So understanding coaching is really key to understanding how to manage people. It's really key to understanding how really to be effective in a mentoring scenario. But also the nature of the of mentoring and coaching being different. It's the practice as well. It's how you actually do it. And so mentoring more about development, coaching more about performance. The coach doesn't need that professional knowledge or experience, where the mentor by and large works in the same field and has that professional context. Coaching is significantly more non-directive by default than mentoring. And mentoring relationships tend to have longer duration. So it's worth pointing out that whilst mentoring relationships are temporary by nature, that doesn't mean they're short-term. Mentoring relationships are, I set up a mentoring program in Soprasterian program project management circles 4 years ago, and there's 4 relationships from there that are still running. So mentoring relationships can grow and evolve, just like friendships grow and evolve. Sometimes it can be a little bit more transactional. It might be 2 or 3 months. There's no right or wrong answer, but you don't tend to have coaching relationships that last anywhere near that time of longevity. And mentoring is about paying back, paying forward, call it what you will, but it's not about taking money for your mentoring services. It's more philanthropic than that. And that's because there's a great developmental benefit for the mentor as well, and we'll explore that very soon. So from there, let's just now center around mentoring. And over a few pages, just really look at what is mentoring all about, to put us in the mindset of where are the benefits, how will this work best for me. So it's a learning and development relationship. We've covered that. A relationship of mutual trust. So where you're opening up to somebody, particularly when you're starting a relationship, and you're talking about things that are relatively personal and important to you, trust is absolutely critical. Being non-directive and all the things go with it, like active listening, for example, is critical. And ultimately, what you're trying to do collectively as a mentor and a mentee is understand, explore, and bring out your full potential. And everybody has much more potential within them than they've been thus far unable to kind of unleash onto their world of work and their world of social interaction. The mentor tends to be more experienced, more knowledgeable, more senior, and the mentee tends to be relatively more junior, less experienced, etc. But it's a peer relationship. So it's not hierarchical where you're asking permission of the mentor. It's a peer relationship. You're both getting something out of it, and you're both engaging from a different place, but with mutual respect and mutual benefit. From the same professional environment, as we said, so that they can bring some subject matter expertise, some insight, and a network, people they could connect you up with, and they're giving back. That's the essence of mentoring and what the mentor kind of looks like at that level. But an effective mentor, and the word agenda is important. We'll talk about an agenda as we move into the benefits of mentoring for the mentee very soon. But staying on the mentee's agenda means that you're listening, you're asking the right questions, you're understanding, you're focused on really understanding everything you can about the mentee, and you'll only respond to where the mentee takes the discussion. So if I flip that the other way and talk, what does that look like from a mentee's perspective? You're really encouraged to think and explore, and that's what builds awareness, and that's what builds a vision of what your options might be and how you might move forwards, and that gives you an ability then to choose the action that you take. So it's very much about trying to build the awareness and tease out the understanding of your goals, your motivations, your objectives. And then in terms of relationships, so we've spoken about non-directive, and it's always good to emphasize that. It's peers, it's not a hierarchical relationship. The mentee needs to take the lead, needs to be in the driver's seat rather than the passenger seat, as it were. It's massively important that a mentoring relationship is entered into onto a voluntary basis. If people are coerced into mentoring, it's very, very unlikely to be effective. It's got to be a choice that you make, and you've got to have an element of desire and purpose going into a mentoring relationship for it to work. And it's an opportunity that your mentor will hopefully accept. So it's successful where it has purpose. It's successful where there's trust. It's successful when it works both ways. And it will develop over time, whether that's months, whether that's years. And the kind of things are important, and more emotional kind of things about shared values and commitment. And this is, again, a great way to build out some of your behavioral skills. Active listening if you're a mentor, for example, and reflection if you're a mentee. So the context has been set, and we'll talk now very specifically about benefits to the mentee. And to start that process, wherever I talk to people, either within my business doing my role developing project managers, or whether through discussion groups with the APM, for example, I always look at people's development as a journey. So an analogy, not nipping around the corner for a pint of milk, but a journey where you've got to go some distance, and therefore it needs to be planned. You need to be clear about your destination, and also you need a purpose, and you've got to take ownership. The fuel in this case for your development is your mental attitude, your positivity about your development. It's about the support that you get to help you on your journey. It's about your clarity of purpose around your goals. All of those kind of things, all of those kind of feelings that take you towards really wanting to fulfill your potential and develop. But it can be unpredictable. So, we've just come out of the pandemic, and that's challenged people in many, many ways. And so I think when you think about development as a journey and recognize there's no quick fixes, you can be a little bit more kind of, what's the word? I say you'd be a little bit more kind of relaxed about a mad period at work where you say, I haven't got time for my development. I'm going to take a back seat for a while, because you've not stalled. You've just taken a little bit of a pause. You pulled into the services on this particular journey. And so seeing it in a bigger picture type of way, I think helps you rationalize where times get difficult and there are demands, and you make it difficult to think about your own development. But ultimately, what I've highlighted towards the bottom there is that you need support or guidance along the way, and that's where mentoring comes in particular. So if we explore the reasons why people want to be mentored, if you don't see your particular reason on these pages, it doesn't mean it's wrong. But from statistical kind of analysis and from a whole bank of varying mentoring programs over time and the analysis that comes with that, these are some of the very typical reasons why people choose to explore mentoring. And you'll see on the left-hand side, it says reactive. So in this scenario here, these kind of drivers that get people into mentoring are reactive, born of a challenge of some description. It may be lack of self-confidence. It may be you just don't know what the art of the possible is. And then conversely, what we look at here is a number of factors that have driven people to get into mentoring that you would call much more proactive, based on choice, based upon a realization that actually, if I wanted to achieve X, mentoring could really help me get there. There's no right or wrong answer, but where you go into a mentoring relationship born of proactive factors, you've got a much more secure foundation to build that relationship on and to explore your goals, and you're more likely to have a highly effective, very rewarding mentoring relationship on the back of that. But whatever your driver is, if it gives you purpose and it gives you a sense of value out of mentoring, then you had a successful mentoring experience. So moving on from that, we just cycle back to the 70-20-10 model. And whilst a number of organizations will have mentoring programs within their organization, a lot of people won't take advantage of those. But some organizations you work in, there may not be a mentoring program there for you to take advantage of. So most commonly, mentoring is something additional to your workplace. It's something you don't have that adds to all the development you get at work. And there are mentoring programs external to any organization that you could explore and tap into. Clearly, for the purpose of this discussion, we've got the APM mentoring program project managers with experience, with insight, a whole variety of different backgrounds are available to be your mentor. You can contextualize that, you can map it to the work that you do, but it's something in addition to what you get in your workplace. And then we look about personal and professional development again. So we go back to your workplace. So this is largely about your professional development. And if you're in the right kind of role, and if you're in the right kind of environment, and 95% of people would say yes to both of those two questions. If you know what you have to do and what is expected of you, and you know how to do that, then you've got a foundation for your development. In the rare cases where those two statements aren't true, those have to be fixed first. It's very difficult to focus on your own development and your own growth when you're rooted in some degree of uncertainty and some degree of tension around not being clear on the day-to-day dynamics. But ultimately, you'll carry on in your workplace, getting all that beneficial developmental kind of set of ingredients. And when we map that to the 70-20-10 model, most likely, that's 70% you're tapping into and you're getting the value out of that. Probably you're getting training at appropriate kind of intervals where it's important. And I'd say, well, less likely in terms of the social learning. And that word agenda comes back. In your workplace, whose agenda are you following? So in a mentoring relationship, the mentor, as we just said, is on the mentee's agenda exclusively. And the reality of work and businesses and profit and success and sustainability, all of those good things, is that the development of people within an organization is principally about performance in their role. And it has a short-term kind of focus. And most appraisals and objective setting performance management kind of regimes talk pretty much about what did you do this year? What do you have to do next year? Whereas, your career aspirations, your developmental kind of goals and objectives, they won't be time boxed to last year, this year necessarily. You may be building towards, I want to be a program director, I want to be a CTO. You may have longer term goals. And so your journey, you want to map out not just what you're going to do the first kind of couple of miles, you're going to map out the journey in a few more higher level kind of milestones. And you don't naturally get that in the workplace. Also, a lot of the objectives you get are given to you because what the organization needs. And quite often it's a perceived or an actual gap in terms of how you map your role description. And so your opportunities to put your own personal objectives into that discussion is relatively small opportunity, which is why it's important you're really clear about what your goals are and what your opportunities are. But it's all about professional development rather than personal, and mentoring therefore adds that social learning interaction into the mix, as well as being something, as well as it's something different as well as. So we're talking in coaching terms, talk about your current reality, but this phrase, your future possibilities, are quite warm to. It sounds quite romantic in some ways, but it's quite enticing to think about a future state. It's quite cathartic to think about where you might end up, what you might achieve, and where you're more likely to get the help over time to take you on that journey is through somebody who will stay with you for the time the relationship is valuable to the pair of you. Quite often your line manager might change because they leave the company or they get a promotion or there's some kind of organizational kind of change. So you get that consistency of support through mentoring you don't necessarily get in the workplace. And you can see all the benefits on the left-hand side around mentoring generally, but it gives you 100% of your opportunities to learn. It brings those scales where your professional development's weighted down and the personal development's not at the same level. It balances the scales out a bit more, and it lets you look at your potential. And the key is, if we all do the same things day in, day out, we're not going to touch our potential by and large. When you start to stretch yourself, when you start to grow, when you start to explore what you're capable of, and you take the shackles off, you're much more into exploring potential, and that's growth. That's development rather than repetition. So we've talked about mutual benefit, and we've just had a conversation there about the benefits to the mentee, and I'm hoping that's striking an accord with people who are thinking about mentoring and thinking about going into a mentoring relationship. But it's good for the mentor as well. And I would say that in my 5 years with Accelerators, I've had a great opportunity to really explore how people develop, and that's been developmental for me personally. And for the last 4.5 years, I've been very heavily involved in mentoring within Accelerators, but also externally. Mentoring on a women in technology mentoring program has been really insightful. Mentoring through the APM in more recent times again. So there's a whole world of kind of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, active listening, a whole set of skills which haven't just helped in my workplace necessarily, but have helped in kind of like social and domestic situation. And particularly if you imagine during lockdown where a lot of the interaction with people is remote, you've got to really hone into those listening kind of skills and communication skills to try and really kind of keep those relationships positive and really understand the essence of what the other people are saying. So benefits to the mentor, emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence takes a long time to develop. It takes work. Any kind of skill, anything that's developmental, you need to understand it, you need to practice it, you need to refine it. And for a lot of people in program project management kind of terms, a lot of what you do every day is you delegate work, you give out tasks, and you look for outcomes, you look for things to get done. You don't often get a great deal of time to sit and do that active listening, for example. And so this is a great opportunity to then develop those skills through being a mentor. Active listening, ability to kind of empathize, building your own self-awareness. So the coaching accreditation, the mentoring I've done has been the most developmental for 4 or 5 years of my career, much more than learning how to be a project manager, learning how to be a program manager, definitely. And then, when you have a list, if you imagine a piece of paper with two columns, 2 lists side by side, and on the left-hand side, you look at all of the kind of the traits and the qualities of a leader, and on the right-hand side, you write all of the skills you need to be a mentor, you've got a massive correlation. And as a mentor, what you're not doing, as we said, because you're being very non-directive, you're not saying, I know the answer, you've got to do this. And sometimes it's really hard because you do know the answer. What you've got to do, though, to give the best experience and do the best you can for your mentee is help them to get there under their own steam, follow that process. And when you've actually worked your way through a puzzle and you've come up with clarity of purpose yourself, that's powerful. That's really kind of revealing, and that's the kind of thing that's part of the fuel for your journey. If all you've ever done is given the answers and told how to do stuff, you're not growing. And then, from perhaps inspire is a strong word, but also as a mentor, you're trying to encourage and help your mentee to explore what their future state might be. And that in itself can be inspiring. So there's a real correlation between leadership qualities, characteristics, and behaviors and mentor kind of skills. Communication, and quite often as a mentor, you'll deal with somebody in a mentoring relationship who comes from a different demographic, different background professionally, different background, domestically. And so, every time you talk to somebody new, you've got to test yourself and you learn a little bit about how you interact and how you explore and how you build rapport, how you build understanding. It's great to practice that because everybody's unique and it'll always be a different experience every time you meet somebody new. And so over time, and I'm currently running 10 mentoring relationships, I have 10 opportunities to really explore things from a different angle, explore myself from a different angle. And yes, again, communication appearing for the second time, it's got many kind of facets, but If you imagine people talking about communication, this is much more than what's being said and what's being heard. But we used to be able to do that because we were in meetings with people. We used to be able to look at posture, body language. People used to call it. You could understand as you get to know people where their tone of voice is different, where their facial expressions are different, where their level of engagement's different. When you're on a Teams call, for example, and particularly if people aren't on camera, you've got to really, really listen hard to try and understand, am I hearing something different? You know, am I hearing that the person is on the other end of the Teams call engaging differently? And how do I interpret that? Is that because they're really interested in this, or is that because they're violently opposed to what I'm saying? So it really has, it's almost like, you know, learning to kind of walk around the house blindfolded. You have to develop other kind of sensory kind of skills because you can't see your way forward visually. And that's the kind of challenge around the pandemic and communication. But this is one of the great things about mentoring. It kind of starts to build that broader appreciation of communication skills. And then reflection. Reflection's a great thing to do. I'd always recommend for a mentor or a mentee, anybody who's committed to their development, to reflect. Because when you think back on what you've done, you know, typically you look back on things that at the time before you'd done them, you would say, that's difficult, that's unknown, I'm not sure. And then you achieve it. And so part of reflection is taking strength and taking positivity from things you've previously achieved. It's making sure you don't lose sight of all the things you are, because normally, you know, natural kind of inclination we all have is, if you think about development, you start from where you are today and think about where you're trying to get to. What you can lose sight of, you know, and this is why reflection is so powerful, is think about all the things you've achieved. Think about all the things you've done to get to where you are, to have this particular conversation about your development opportunities now. And again, it builds it builds awareness of you. You understand yourself better, how you felt in certain situations, what you did, what worked, what didn't work, how you grew from that, how you moved forward, and how that shaped who you are now. So reflection's massive. It's a key thing for the mentee. But as a mentor, as you reflect in the same way, but quite often you'll have experience, you'll have insight that's really helpful to your mentee. So with the word insight, just going to end now just a few pages with some statistics. This is all born of scientific study. You'll see the credits at the bottom of each page, but there's the headline on this page, I think, is organizations understand the value of mentoring. Some more than others, but there's an organizational benefit. So this is a win-win-win. So in a mentoring relationship that's effective, great for the mentee, great for the mentor. But we'll see a few stats as we move forward, but it's great for the organization as well for a number of reasons. And what I like at the bottom, 89% of people who have been mentored go on to mentor others. I think that's got to tell you something. And then different kind of set of stats. And I really don't like to talk about mentoring and imply a direct correlation to promotion, although the stats support it. And the reason is I always encourage people to think about promotion as an outcome rather than a goal. What takes people to a position where they get promoted is their growth, developing the knowledge, developing their experience, developing their capability, developing their competence, developing their behaviors. It's the development that takes you to a position of proficiency, a position of understanding where you can be promoted. Mentoring in its own right won't get you promoted. It's the benefit that mentoring delivers will take you to that kind of position where you're more rounded, you're more capable and likely to get promoted. But things like feelings start to come in, you know, and questions were asked about how do you feel about mentoring, and you know, do you feel that your colleagues value your work? You know, people felt that they had more credibility, they were engaging more in the workplace, they were seen different in the workplace through mentoring. And the word empowered, confidence is a great word. And then just a couple more of these, and again a little bit of salary stuff at the top, but organizational benefit in terms of retention. And this isn't people who are mentored exclusively by mentors in their same organization. This was mentoring generally, you know, and the retention rates for both mentees and mentors were higher, to the tune of a fifth, and a little bit more for mentees. And then finally, this was looking at CEOs. So questions about mentoring, exploring that, but these are CEOs. And so what this says very simply is, you're never too old to be mentored. You're never too senior to be mentored. It's never a wrong solution. Quite often CEOs, they might go more towards coaching, but there's no limit. It's not, you're not too early to start being mentored. You're not too late to start being mentored. If it's right for you, then it's right. So finally, and this isn't a mentoring stat per se, but this is really pertinent to mentoring. It's pertinent to development, because as you develop, a key element of that is setting goals. And so some fascinating kind of insight and statistical kind of evidence says that if you've got a goal and you write that down, you are 40% more likely to achieve that goal. Because the act of writing it down, firstly, you can't write without thinking. So you've got to think about it, but you build emotional attachment. It becomes more real. It becomes more embedded within you. But more importantly, if you then share that with someone else, maybe you tell family, maybe you tell friends, maybe you tell your boss, maybe you tell colleagues, but once you share with someone about your goal, and let's take the analogy of somebody running a marathon. A lot of people could think about running a marathon, and all of a sudden that idea fizzles out and it never happens. You then start to write it down and think about, what would that mean to me? What do I have to do to be able to run the marathon? Then you start to build that attachment, or you start to think, actually, not for me. When you tell people, I think as soon as you've told someone I'm running a marathon, it's really hard to come back from that position, it feels. And that may be the catalyst that keeps you going, or it may be you're telling them because you're really passionate about running the marathon. And so just bear these set of stats in mind as you think about your development through mentoring or otherwise. Be clear about your goals, and do that through, you don't have to write an essay, but writing that down, but share your goals with people, and they may well volunteer ways they can help you, or people who can help you. So that is the end of the discussion. So thank you very much for listening to this discussion. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you found it insightful. And most of all, I hope it's inspired you to think more about your next steps in your mentoring journey, whether to start a mentoring relationship, whether to become a mentor, whatever that might be. But I'll just close by sort of going back to the following discussion. So Thursday, 21st of April, the discussion is about the effective mentor. That's most insightful for people becoming a mentor or an existing mentor, but it might also be insightful for people who are, being mentored, or people still thinking about a mentoring relationship. Beyond that, Thursday the 12th of May, making your mentoring relationship work. This is really looking to provide some insight and some ideas and some thought to people who are being mentored, try and help them really understand the mentoring process so they can make the most out of that mentoring relationship. These are both events that you can book through the APM events page. They're available to members and non-members. They're free to join, and they'll last no more than an hour on those designated dates. And hopefully, look forward to joining you again for those two discussions. Thank you again very much.